So I'm the Atherton liaison this year, and I had a meeting with Carrie and Bill, Councilmember Weeks and Councilmember Widmer, just to get to know them. This was the day of our meeting, I think on February 21st. And so I had already seen our packet and kind of alerted them that this Citygate study was going to be out there. But it was really not even a study, it was more of an informational presentation item. So there was no decision to be made about moving any stations or even closing or anything. And actually the report was, and how I viewed it was kind of a second phase approach, the second part of a two-phase approach with the standards of coverage, which was done in the 2015-2016-ish year. And this was this report, even though it was separate from the standards of coverage, addressed those issues. So it just all happened at the same time. I don't know if you've even had a chance to look at the standards of coverage. I know that I know that Carrie's a little familiar with that, just a little. And really what we were trying to do as a fire district was get ahead of and be prepared for this huge development that's happening on the east side, which has been a challenge to work with, and with response time and just even the new infrastructure that's happened, the building infrastructure, the hotels and Facebook's purchase of property there. So we just wanted to try to get ahead of all of that. But in doing so, this is again just the first part, the standards of coverage study. The second part, how I view it, is this other Citygate presentation. But the issue of fire stations this is not a new issue. In fact, the fire district and the fire board in particular have prioritized what to do with our fire stations around the district, just because a lot of them are aging. And so this actually started before I even got on the board. I want to say around 2007-ish, so about 10 years ago, the fire district board started to prioritize. And so we were looking at East Palo Alto as the top priority because it was one of the oldest and it was just dilapidated practically, leaking roofs and just not as secure as it could be. So we finished that project, and that opened up last June of 2016. Station 6, which is the downtown Menlo Park station, is obviously in the process of being built, but that is also one of the stations that serves that southern part of Atherton. So it serves a pretty big area. In fact, I think one of the most congested, the most dense areas, with the commercial space in downtown Menlo Park, Menlo College, those schools on Valparaiso, at Menlo College, Menlo School, and Sacred Heart. So it serves those areas as well as some of the West Menlo, downtown Menlo Park residential areas, and the southern part of Atherton, close to Alejandro, and just behind Menlo College and Menlo School, that area. I mean, it serves other areas too, but that's the immediate area. So that was also a priority. So that is now being built. The other, just so that you know, the other stations that we've been talking about, even this year, because of all of the development that's happening on the east side, was how to prioritize those stations. So Station 1 and Station 77, those are two stations that we're looking at because of the need there, the immediate need. And Station 4, is on the west side. It serves West Menlo, unincorporated Menlo, West Atherton, near Los Lomitas, that whole area, and Atherton Avenue, Walsh Road, that whole area, and further north, actually going up to Woodside Road in that unincorporated area of Redwood City. So stations 3 and 5, which are quite frankly about 20 to 25 years old, were really not in the discussion in terms of doing anything at this time. Not because we don't care about them, but just because these other stations were older and needed help, more or less. So based on just those priorities right now, it looks like there's no desire, or we're not going to move any station. We're certainly not going to close down Station 3. And in fact, during that meeting, we had actually a very good discussion because we discussed, because the Atherton station came up, Station 3 came up, and Rob and I were really talking about this town center piece, which in 2015, we had heard from, I'd received a letter from then Mayor DeGolia for us to, consider working with y'all to see how we can incorporate something into the town center. And what the Citygate report said was not to put any resources at this time. But during the discussion in the meeting when we were talking about that station and moving, we weren't going to move it, but they were looking at possible other locations for 2 other stations, for Station 5 near North Fair Oaks and another station closer to the unincorporated part of Redwood City. 2 issues came up. One was, and it really is a macro and a philosophical issue, is how do we deal with a growing density problem and congestion problem along this El Camino corridor, and how do we meet the needs of the rest of the district, because everything is getting so congested. So I think that before there was this thought that, okay, well, we're going to build like a big station in these areas. And after the Citygate presentation, I think the question came up of, well, if this El Camino area near Atherton and Menlo Park gets really bad, maybe we need to look at putting something on the eastern side of El Camino, because Station 3 is on the west side of El Camino, right? So what does that look like? And it's the New York or the Manhattan model. Do you have more small stations in more locations, or do you have these larger stations in areas that serve a broader population? And actually, I think that's probably going to be one of the questions that we address. But again, this was just information only. No decisions have been made. At the last joint meeting that your council and our fire board had, I thought we made it pretty clear that we wanted input if we move forward with any kind of decision. We know that to close a station, move a station, add on to a station, you're going to have public input of every kind. Not just the city, just residents, businesses, government entities, all of that. So I don't know how this has blown up like this, except that it may be a matter of semantics, like we accepted the report, but that doesn't mean we adopted or approved any recommendations. So I just wanted to be very clear that this was mainly an informational presentation, that there was no decision to be made, or had no decision made to close down any stations. And in fact, I think the discussion is going to continue because some issues were brought up at the February 21st meeting. So I hope that clarifies things. I know that y'all want to send a letter, and I'm hoping that we can kind of put that off right now, because we are planning a meeting with the liaisons on June 5th, I think that it's still kind of being scheduled at this time. And well,
okay, so we're gonna write it down for you.
our staff, Michelle Radcliffe has put out June 5th as a tentative date. I don't have
June 5th, yeah.
So you have June 5th too. Okay, so that's the tentative date that I know, unless it's subject to change based on everyone else's schedule. But so I would like to talk about this. And so, but I understand if you have this letter and you want to send it, I totally understand. It's perfectly within your rights to do that. But I think we've enjoyed a great working relationship. I just think back to when we had to interview for a new fire chief. Your police chief sat in those interviews, and I know that our fire chief is sitting in interviews. So there's definitely a synergy there, and I just want us to continue the good work, because at the end of the day, we're here to serve all of the residents. You're required or mandated, and your desire is to serve the Atherton residents, and we are. That's the same thing that we're trying to do, along with all of the residents and property owners in the fire district. So I'm happy to answer any questions, and I hope that this kind of clears the air at this time.
Thanks. What's the pleasure? Any questions for Virginia, or do you want to bring it up?
I actually have a question.
Okay.
When Mayor Begolia wrote the letter asking for potentially participation in the Civic Center for a hydrant, was there a board decision? Was there a vote to it?
You know, Carrie, I don't remember actually. I thought that we were going to look at this in the study.
I think it was a formal process, so I think there was actually a vote.
I thought that we were asking Citygate to, that was why that was part of this report, this presentation.
I'm sorry, but I think that what happened during that meeting was there was a vote by the board to not participate. And for some reason, adding it later on, Citygate apparently somewhere in the channel after your decision was to not be involved, you guys made a decision to evaluate potential options for this location as well as addressing issues with Station 3. Somewhere between that vote, I mean, I will tell you, a little bit surprised that Citygate was even considering other options related to Atherton, because it was news, because you guys had formally voted in favor of not addressing anything within the Civic Center.
I thought that we were gonna look at the possibility of dealing with ambulance service, like having like a little area, because you and I had talked about this, about how there's a lot of ambulances just waiting at Holbrook Palmer Park, and I didn't think that, you know, having a full-fledged station.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. We asked you to look at that at an emergency response possibility.
To house it
because
too.
it seemed to us that was a need that might be more fully met by locating something there, and we're aware of there being 2 ambulances on
Just
a daily basis
waiting
parked in
there,
the park.
right?
And I think Harry's saying that he was surprised that then, as part of the Citygate assessment, there was consideration of putting a fire station at the Civic Center. That was, look, I mean, the only word I could say is, where did that come from?
Well, I thought, okay, so I don't know, except that there was that letter, but I thought that their report was not to put any resources there, not just an
Why?
engine company.
Just what was.
So, because my conversations with y'all have been, well, let's look at, in fact, I brought it up at one of our meetings. How can we look at working with AMR and, you know, having some place in that area with the ambulances, because there's obviously a need if they're at Holbrook Palmer Park. So that was then directed to staff to look at that. And so I don't think there was an actual resolution for that.
So at the joint session with the fire
Yeah,
district and
I think it was
ourselves,
like,
we did discuss the issue related to an ambulance, but the district said we are not in the business of ambulance providing, and we will not, because the county has the contract related to that. So that door was shut at the joint session. So we didn't consider that anymore. We obviously thought it'd be a great idea,
well,
but
obviously
then
not.
changing it to a potential EMT response vehicle, 2-man, very similar to what Palo Alto did, right? They reduced because traffic congestion.
They need smaller vehicles,
easier
faster,
response.
right?
But again, that was not a discussion that came up afterwards until you guys are discussing it with the Seagate study, that you were considering the Civic Center as an option, as well as what to do with Station 3.
So I think what I need to do, Carrie, because I really don't remember, is to go back and find out when we commissioned the Citygate study vis-a-vis the ambulances. So I'm sorry, I just don't remember, but I will ask about that, because that could have been a timing thing too.
And then just another question, you mentioned, and this is the first time hearing it, you guys have mentioned in your business plan that your stations are going to 2 base stations, and that's why a lot of your upgrades are going into, so they're not the standard, you're widening your response, maybe 2 stations, or two battalions, if I might?
Well, so again, I think after the Citygate presentation and that kind of model versus the Manhattan model, which is, like I said, smaller stations in more areas, I think that is going to be an issue that we're going to be discussing.
So is that a new plan?
it's not a plan. I mean, we don't even know if, I mean, it just came up in that meeting. So our next meeting, I don't know if it's going to be on the agenda, but I know that since that issue came up with regard to the El Camino corridor and, you know, the Station 3 being on the west side, you know, what if we need something in the area becomes more congested, would it be better to have a smaller area, a smaller station on the eastern part of El Camino? So, I mean, again, Carrie, that has not been discussed. That's just that's totally my speculation that could be an issue that comes up that we will discuss. Doesn't mean there's a plan, but it's just, it could be a plan later on, but I just don't, not right now.
Elizabeth had a question as well.
Thanks.
Virginia, thank you for coming and talking to us. I know this is got to be difficult, you know, because there are clearly other members of your board that don't perceive it the way you do, and which has precipitated this letter from our mayor because of the positions that have been taken. It would be nice to diffuse the heightened sense of tension between the two districts, but you have to understand that we had that joint meeting and there was all this kumbaya stuff, and then, you know, you guys just kind of went off on your own little tangent, and we get noticed noticed about some things that are going on, even though decisions haven't been made. But you mentioned something that, you know, you're going to have lots of public input and outreach when you do
If it gets there,
make
Elizabeth.
decisions
Yeah.
about what to do. So did you have lots of public outreach in the Oak Grove station that when you decided to expand and rebuild that?
We did, and
Did you?
there were public notices for our meetings.
Yeah.
There were plans that were laid out because we had to deal with the city of Menlo Park for that too, and there was a whole issue with that particular station with regard to the downtown specific plan. Part of
And the size of it.
Or-
I mean, how does it compare to our almond draw size?
well, there are two lots right
Yeah.
now, right
Yeah.
there. So it's going to be bigger, and it's going to be from what I understand, a driveway that allows you to drive around instead of having to back in from
I
Oak
see.
Grove.
Okay.
So there were two lots. There's the current lot where the old station was, which has now been demolished,
Yeah.
and then there was the Hoover House, which was along Hoover, right next to the station. So the lot is bigger. We were able to purchase Hoover House for the purpose of making it bigger, but also making it so that the driveway
Right.
kind of is like a
But
semicircle.
I understand that the almond draw station is kind of landlocked and it's small, and so there's been discussion that you can't kind of put the two bays, you can't enlarge it, and so it's kind of obsolete, and
Well, I don't know if it's
prices are
obsolete.
too expensive to expand. You can't buy another lot.
Well, I mean, I don't even know if there's a lot for sale
Yeah.
there. That's the thing. So
But
I know what you're saying, Elizabeth, but again, I think it's going to go back down to this discussion of the Manhattan model, or, you know, do we do another station like a Station 2? Actually, Station 6 is not going to be as big as Station 2. It just can't be because of there's just not enough property there.
I think Ms. Whitmer had some questions.
So, of course, you and I spoke today, and we
Yeah.
met on the 21st, and just, we got made aware of the document, actually on the 21st, you sent it.
The city
after
gates.
the meeting,
Yeah.
And I reviewed it very quickly, and I sent you a letter and said a couple concerns. One was the proposed relocation, and then the other one I pointed out to you was that while even Peter says in his video, we get the same response as everybody else, but I pointed out to you and you concurred with me that we actually don't.
You mean with regard to
Lindenwood does not
Lindenwood?
get the 4-minute response, even by the city gate, and all of the response, and so I didn't hear, and I had talked to Rob. I haven't heard that even in the city gate somebody said, hey, we need to fix that, because we wanna make sure everybody has the same response, but no one's saying that. In fact, people are saying, even though they read the report, you get the same response. And so even saying it to his neighbors, not calling anybody's name out. So, you know, I think that really, when you're looking at things, it needs to be brought up that we're not getting the same response. And, you know, and I think all we're asking for, as you know, and I appreciate you spent the time with Carrie and I, but all we're asking for in this letter, which I'm sure you've read, is the same thing that you've asked us. You've said, hey, we'd like to have input on when you guys are doing something on the road. And we want to tell you why we think you shouldn't shrink down El Camino. And we think that you shouldn't be putting speed bumps here because, you know, everybody else has speed bumps, but we want to shoot down your roads. I mean, you tell us all that stuff and we're saying, hey, well, we would like to have a seat at the table. And to your credit, you did meet with Carrie and I, and you made it aware, and you sent us the link, but it was the day of the meeting. So we couldn't get a group of people to come to the meeting and say, hey, we've read this thing. I mean, it was kind of short notice. And, you know, I couldn't change my schedule, and Carrie, you know, he couldn't stay for the whole meeting. So, you know, I mean, yes, you had your thing out there. It just says City Gate report, but, you know, we weren't aware to go look at it. So I do think that really, how you guys provide the service for me is that's your decision, as Peter very clearly pointed out. But we need to get the good service, especially since we're paying a premium for the service, and we want to be treated, you know, the same. And I think that really, you know, I know Rob argued a lot, and I know that you had a couple key inputs and you're supporting his arguments too. But you know, I do think that it is important that we get a seat at the table, not just hey we put a notice in the paper or it's on our web and anybody can go look and see when it is, but we wanted to have these meetings, so we wanted to be able to sit down. And I think that you know, as our liaison, I would hope that you would bring those couple messages back because it's key. And I think that the letter is not an inflammatory letter. I think that the letter, from my perspective, you know, just says we want a seat at the table, and we were a little surprised that we asked the chief to come and make a presentation here to kind of explain what's going on, and he said no.
So Bill, so there are a couple of things in there that I just want to make sure that I'm understanding. So I share your concerns about having a seat at the table, and I have talked to the chief about that and to the board president. And I, at least when I was president, I tried to make sure that happened. With regard to Lindenwood, after you and I spoke today, I actually talked to the chief about that specific concern. And he mentioned that he had not received any complaints. So, and he's always very receptive in hearing feedback. So if you're hearing from residents, would you please have him
I looked at your report as I documented it to you. You asked me to look at the report, and
right.
I said one concern I have in your report is that it shows the areas that don't meet the service criteria in orange.
I brought that up too.
The part of Lindenwood was the roads were painted in orange,
right.
Meaning that they don't get the same level of service as everybody else.
Well, so I brought that up actually because I remember that it was actually close to that the northeast corner that abuts Marsh Road. That area.
It's more than just
but I mean, but it's that area.
Yeah.
And so I was told that they were getting that. So when I told the chief today about your concerns, he told me that he had not heard that. So I just want you to know that in that meeting, and it's on the tape, that I did bring that up because it was that orange part.
It was in the report.
So yes. So if you're getting feedback from Lindenwood residents, can you please have them either talk to me or the chief?
So just on that one point, because of that, the Seagate report does not acknowledge, it doesn't take a position to try to increase that service for that location that Bill's talking about. I mean,
Well, it's a closed off area, that was part of the feedback I got, because I asked that question, and it's totally walled off. So because I asked, if you look at Station 5, is that the closest, or is Station 3 the closest, right?
So is that location just gonna be collateral damage to?
No, I don't
where the
know.
stations are located?
We haven't even discussed that, Carrie. That's what I'm saying, is that this was just a presentation. And I think people on the board, and we accepted it, and acceptance doesn't mean that we approved or approved anything. But I have a feeling those discussions are gonna continue, and I do thank y'all for keeping this discussion alive. I think it's very important, so.
Not to be disrespectful, but the station locations that were addressed also identified areas that it would enhance or increase service to.
Fix the orange problem.
So
Into the northeast and northwest part.
the two considerations that Atherton had was to increase service locations primarily to unincorporated areas. None of those locations increased the service levels for the area that goes.
Right, and so, just so you know, and I'm not disagreeing with you, Carrie.
I'm just saying that it doesn't seem that that report was taking into consideration if it was to address concerns that Atherton potentially would have. It doesn't matter, because the district's concerns are for the unincorporated zones, because those locations would enhance those areas as far as levels of service, and didn't address even the area of orange that Bill's.
Right, but
You know, Virginia, I'm sorry,
Oh.
it's sort of unfair that we're putting.
No,
you on the spot
I
like this,
just, but
and
I
feel
do
bad.
want to address that, because it's one of the
Please.
two issues that I think are gonna, this is one issue that's been out there for many years, and I don't know, Carrie, did you hear my comment about the concern I have for mutual aid possibly being more enhanced? And so that's my concern, is would those two locations force us to be responsive to other agencies outside of our district? It becomes a subsidy issue versus mutual aid or automatic aid. And so, again, I think that's another issue that's been, at least on my mind, because I've been bringing it up ever since I was on the fire board. So I think along with those, and I know it's an issue for the chief, because he and I have talked about it since before I got on the fire board. So I think that issue is going to continue to play out, as well as the different models. It's like the Manhattan model, like I said, or the other ones that's like the Station 2 kind of model. You're not putting me on the spot, so
No,
but I just
no,
don't want to go
we're
over
also
time.
staying quite
Yeah,
for us, so
thank
just to let
you.
know, that's unusual, but Rick has some.
Hi, Rick.
So Virginia, you started your statement tonight by talking about how important it was to you that there be good communication between this council and the fire board, and I'm sure that's true for the other councils that are within your district. And just to go back over some history, you and I intentionally created a meeting, the first joint meeting between this council and your board in some time when you were president and I was mayor. And we followed that up since then with a meeting last year, which was quite delayed from when we had intended, and we planned one for the end of this year. And at the time that we had that joint meeting, we established a framework for very good communication. And I think that your chief, in fact, expressed great appreciation for it, because he didn't feel that he had the opportunity to influence decisions within other jurisdictions around such things as some of these traffic calming devices and other road-related decisions that have a great impact on the fire department. I think since that time, the relationship between the organizations has dramatically deteriorated. And I think that occurred where I first really saw it may have had other origin, but where I first saw it was when we asked the board to look at the idea of putting an emergency response unit in the Civic Center, which we looked at because we were starting to design the Civic Center and it was wide open. And it seemed reasonable to us that there might be a enhanced service opportunity within Atherton if the department used some of that space. We didn't tell you we wanted you to do it. We asked you to the chief, in a staff report, said that he didn't think it was economically justified, and he rejected it, fine. But in connection with that, there were comments that were made by your current president, which I could only say were inflammatory, where he accused this council of trying to take tax dollars from the fire district, which is utterly ridiculous. And I think it began a ball rolling that has resulted in a deteriorated relationship that none of us want. I mean, at the last meeting that we had in December, when Mike was just elected mayor, we specifically asked to be involved in any assessment that might impact the level of service or the facilities that you had within the town of Atherton. And I don't know that we were even aware of the Citygate study, but clearly the Citygate study looked at that issue, and it was, and as we could see in the tape that played tonight, your president not only didn't want us to be involved, but he specifically insisted that we not. And I just think that's wrong. There's a communication between these organizations is only good. We have lots of residents, and you have lots of residents that are in common that we represent. And the more we can communicate to explore how to work better together, and I know you have big issues in terms of access from the west to the east side.
Yeah.
And we're very open to working with you on that, but I mean, there's a problem.
So Rick, I'm not going to disagree with you. I mean, I know when you were the mayor and I was the board president, we really made an effort to work together, and quite frankly, you were the only really the person I didn't really know on this council, right? And I mean, and look at the result. We had that red light beacon thing, and so I mean, I cannot tell you how much I appreciate our working relationship, which in my opinion is kind of developed into a friendship as well. I don't even know how to address the other issue except that we need to, and I've told the chief, we expect certain things. It's pretty much what Bill had said. You know, you want us to, if you want to be included in their public process, we need to give them the same, meaning the fire district needs to give the town the same courtesy, the same. And so the only thing I can do, Rick, is kind of just be here to not even be a buffer as much as just to calm things down so that the hyperbole that's coming out from the president, who thinks, you know, he's acting as a resident and a private citizen, is really not representative of the whole fire board. I'm actually here on behalf of the fire board, right? And so I think that I'm giving y'all the official stance that we're taking, which is basically this is the Citygate report was an informational item. There were no decisions made, and there was certainly nothing in terms of the pecking order where Station 3 is going to be closed and two new stations are going to be open. As I said, there, you know, these other issues, the type of model versus the subsidy or, you know, mutual aid, those issues have to thoroughly be discussed more. I just don't know, except that I can tell you that when you're hearing from me, I'm trying to represent the fire district in the best way possible. But I can't ask, you know, Peter Carpenter to not say anything as a resident. I think he's trying to separate that from his board presidency, which is probably why he's not here tonight. So does that kind of help?
I understand that, and I respect very much that you're here.
I wouldn't have
we
missed
want that
Thank
relationship. Carrie spends quite a bit of time coming to the fire board.
Every meeting, and we love it, Carrie. And we appreciate it. And I'm going to look about
I'm not trying to attack anybody.
I
That's
know.
really not my desire. My desire is only to establish or reestablish that mechanism. And I think Mike's letter is terrific. I mean, I fully support sending this letter.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
just one comment, because Virginia's here, and I just want to make clear, that, like everyone else has said, how much I appreciate appreciate your being here and how much respect I have for you coming in, because I know you do it, it wouldn't be an easy, brief meeting. But, just so you're clear, from my perspective, a lot of what you said is completely true and valid, and there's no issue, from my perspective. But, a couple of things. One, I'm really focused on input, much less than, and I think it's unconscionable that somebody would look at just intentionally disregard input. We don't want input, and it disregards. We have a police department here that is an emergency response. They're out there. They're often the first to arrive, and the fire department arrives next. And we depend on close collaboration and close cooperation. And we hear, I'm on the transportation, I'm a liaison transportation committee here. We hear a lot from the fire district about our transportation issues and about traffic calming devices, and we like that. We appreciate it. We want to get their input. We want to get it right. But it's really troubling when you then turn around and there's an issue that directly affects the town after representations and commitments have been made, that we'll have an opportunity to get input, and we're denied the input. And not only denied the input, but there's basically statements made that they don't care about the input.
Well, I don't think that sentiment is shared by all of us on the board, but I think, Mike, I probably didn't make myself clear. I think what we were trying to say is we're not even at the point where we would even need input for moving a station or doing.
Well, then my question would be, why would you spend money and time and effort and ask for a study and design a study if you don't care about what it says or if it doesn't
Well,
matter
that
what
was
it
in
says?
response to this, in my view, response to the standards of coverage. It was, to me, it was a two-part thing, even though I've been told that they were separate. But but Peter and I even talked about how they kind of go together. That this Citygate report was just their information and research based on our standards of coverage. So it was like a two-pronged study, if you will.
Yeah, and
I know, but what I'm saying is, when that time comes, or if it even comes, I don't even know, because
but
like
they
I
made a
said,
recommendation that you accepted the report. In the report, there's a recommendation made.
but not to approve. So our definition of accept, and I actually, because Bill
No,
and I
understand,
talked
but
about
is it not accurate that they made a recommendation?
to accept it, but that doesn't.
No, the
that,
Citygate in the study, does it make recommendations? Or
The last section.
they have their recommendation, but our charge was to accept the report, but that doesn't mean that we were going to take
I
their
understand that fully.
recommendation.
No,
Yeah.
that's not wrong, but you paid Citygate to do a study. You
It
paid
doesn't
them to
mean
read
that we agree with
recommendations.
everything that
No, I understand.
Citygate does.
They make recommendations.
Yeah.
There's a reason for that, and the reason is clearly to influence public policy or to give you something to gnaw on or to give some information that's, of value or you wouldn't pay for it. And so that's why it seems to me it's on the table. Whatever you say, it's on the table. When
Okay.
you get a recommendation,
That's
it's
fair
on
enough.
the table. Right?
That's fair enough, Mike.
And so that's where I think our desire for input is completely legitimate, and that's for me is where the issue arises. Yeah, that's just and
I
let me also
understand.
stress, I very much want to get to a really close cooperative collegial relationship, professional, like we have with most members of the board, with most of the district. And I know professionally, I'll look at the acting chief, but I know that we've got a professional, the police department and the fire department are a really well-oiled machine in many ways. They cooperate and do a lot together. And that's really important to us.
Okay.
So-
Well, I'll bring this back at our meeting next week about this.
No, well, thank you. I think that's great. And again, I feel like, thank you very much for coming in. It's
That's the
much
least that we
appreciated.
can do, Mike. I mean, y'all are in the fire district, and I'm here on behalf of the fire district. Just remember that I am speaking on behalf of this board.
Thank you. very
Thank
much.
you.
We appreciate
Thanks.
it. Okay, let's call that, yes.
Well, I just wanna say, in looking at,
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
looking at the chief's staff report that ordered, or that defined what the Citygate inquiry was going to be about, it includes a statement about looking at stations 3, 4, and 5 prior to the board determining that it not move those facilities, but rather acquire additional property in order to rebuild larger facilities. So there was a concept there that, that I think the Citygate analysis that looked at stations 3 and 5 2005 and that you guys accepted and filed. And I understand you didn't take action on it, but there was some thought that was requesting Citygate to look into, you know, whether they wanted to continue, whether they would advise to continue to operate those facilities or to move those facilities or acquire additional property. That's part of the charge.
Right, based on the standards of coverage. That's, so in my mind, that has always been the connection,
Yeah,
right?
That's right.
Right, and so again,
That's
like,
right.
I think that, again, the discussion about the kind of model we're gonna have is probably gonna be on a future agenda, I don't know for sure, but it just seems like it would be, because that was brought up, and actually the Citygate consultant mentioned that along El Camino, east side versus west side, right? So I get what you're saying, Rick, but I'm just saying that the discussion is in my mind only starting.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to target it on Atherton. There's other jurisdictions
Right.
that have stations in their jurisdictions, which I'm pretty sure the department doesn't reach out to either. So, you know,
If you're talking about Station 6, we try to do
because
it.
we take really seriously
I know.
representing our residents, and we want to make sure they're going to get the best service they can and understand what's happening with, you know, within their service area.
And that's why I appreciate this is now really out in the open, because I think it's helping us define other issues like that Citygate report discussion kind of brought out. So thank you. And you know that I'm always available for y'all to talk to. Thanks.
Great. Okay, as to the letter, council discussion, Bill?
I thought your letter, especially the second page, which gets to the heart of it, was well written, and I think it's, even though, you know, people may have read it, I mean, there's also been a response already from the fire board chairman, who, I don't know if he was writing as a chairman or if he's writing as a public citizen, because he goes back and forth, but, I think we should send a letter, because, I mean, why did we write it if we're not gonna send it? So,
I think it was a very well-written letter, and I don't have a problem with any of the sentences or anything.
Okay, great.
Totally supportive.
Okay. We don't even formulate that on this, right? Okay. Then I think we'll have entertain a motion, well, anything else?
Move adjourned.
Okay.
all right.
All in favor, aye. Okay.
Yeah,
Sorry to take so long.
I didn't want to take any additional time because there was a falling over.
Yeah, I know, I thought, yeah, you know, I thought that, I hope you find out library services here.
I'm sorry, I'm getting down to it.
Well, Peter has some daughters. Yes, they should try to be.
So during that discussion, I had an idea that might address, and you guys have any help with it.
You know, I know.